Is the Umidigi A11 still worth buying in 2021? Well, in this video, we're gonna find out. What's going on, guys? Kalipis Tech here, coming back at you with another video. In this video, we're gonna be taking a look at the Umidigi A11 and going over what kind of value it provides in 2021. Before we go any further, I do want to ask everybody watching this video to go ahead and hit that subscribe button. It really does help out the channel a lot. That being said, let's get into it. So this phone has a 6.53-inch LCD display with a resolution of 720p, a PPI of 269, and an aspect ratio of 20:9. We got a water drop notch up here for the front-facing camera, and this camera is 8 megapixels. Overall, this display is a really good size. It's large enough to give you the benefits of having a larger display. So when you're doing something like streaming videos, viewing photos, reading, that sort of thing, basically consuming content of any kind, everything's gonna look a lot better on this display than others that aren't quite as big. And at the same time, this display isn't so large that it's uncomfortable to hold in your hand or carry in your pocket. The design itself has these squared off edges that I actually kind of like. But the phone is a little bit thick. It's not the thickest out there, but it is pretty thick and it has some good weight to it. So on one hand, it is a little bit bulky, not too bad, but it's still, for a phone, especially without a case, it does feel a little on the bulky side, but at the same time, the weight that it has does make it feel quite a bit higher end than some other phones, especially in this price range. This is an entry-level phone, so phones in this price range do tend to have a really lightweight design. Some of them are so light, made of that cheap plastic that makes it almost feel hollow. But with this phone, on the other hand, you can tell they put some quality materials in there, and I really like that. On the back here, we got this matte material that doesn't pick up fingerprints too badly, but you can see in this lighting, they still are there. Overall, I do like the design. Another thing about it that makes it look really good is the thin bezels. They're not the thinnest out there. And we got this little lip at the bottom that's a little bit thicker than the rest of the bezels. But I would say the one thing I really don't like about the display is the water drop notch. I think they would have done a lot better with a hole punch design for this camera, just because the water drop notch doesn't look nearly as clean. But overall, I do like the display and the design. This phone has 128 gigabytes of internal storage with microSD card expansion, so that's really good, especially for an entry-level phone. You're really not going to get any higher than this unless you get into the high-end flagship phones like the Samsung Galaxy S21 Ultra or the iPhone 12 Pro Max. Some of those phones have 256 to 512 gigabytes, but in the entry-level range, this is pretty much the max you're gonna get, and 128 gigabytes is no small amount. For the average user, you're never gonna have to even think about storage, and if you're more of a power user with a bunch of apps on your phone, you're still gonna be perfectly fine. You'll have plenty of room for apps, and if you have photos and videos that you put on your phone as well, you can use the microSD card for that and expand the storage even more. There's no wireless charging with this phone, but the device security features are really good. We got face unlock, as well as a fingerprint scanner right here on the power key, which is, in my opinion, the best spot for it. Let's go ahead and give it a try right now. There we go, one more time. And there we go. As you can see, this fingerprint scanner is really fast and responsive. No issues here. Now taking a look at the rear camera setup, we got a 16 megapixel rear camera, an 8 megapixel ultra wide camera, and a 5 megapixel macro camera. So this phone has a really good camera setup, pretty much every feature. Whether you're a more casual user of the camera, who still values a high quality picture every now and then, maybe you like to use portrait mode or something simple like that, or if you're into the more advanced features like the ultra wide camera or the macro camera, this phone's camera setup is going to be pretty good for pretty much anyone. For video, this phone can shoot videos in 1080p in both the rear and front cameras, but be aware that since the display is only 720p, that's what you're going to be viewing those videos in when you view them on the device itself. Internally, this phone's getting 4 gigabytes of RAM with the MediaTek Helio G25 processor. I ran a Geekbench 5 benchmark test on this phone and it came back with a single core score of 152 and a multi-core score of 827. So this isn't really bad, and I haven't had any performance issues with the device, but at the same time, if you compare it to other phones in its price range, it is a little on the low side. There are plenty of phones out there that have quite a bit more processing power than this. So if you're looking for a phone that's really fast and has the ability to do some extra stuff besides basic activities without struggling at all, then you might want to look at different devices. But that being said, again, I haven't had any performance issues with the phone. It does function fine on everything I've used it for. So if you're looking for a phone to use for basic activities like sending text messages, making calls, using the camera, doing some light web browsing and social media use, then this phone is going to be perfectly fine. But if you're really into mobile gaming and maybe video editing or something like that that takes up more RAM than your average activities, you're probably going to be disappointed with this phone because it's going to struggle in activities like that. This phone has a 5150 milliamp hour battery, which is really good. In general, there are not that many phones that have larger than a 5000 milliamp hour battery, so that's really impressive that this phone does, even if it's not by a whole lot. With a battery of this size, you're going to have a lot of life per charge, as well as being able to keep it for a longer period of time before the battery wears out so much that you need to replace it. Because with a larger battery, when the battery degrades, you don't notice it nearly as quickly as you would with something like an iPhone 12 that has about half the battery size of this. So it's definitely a good thing to have a larger battery if you like to keep your phone for a longer period of time. Now this phone does have some other unique features that other ones don't. Like for example, they have this little key right here. It's called a smart key. There are lots of different functions for this key, but basically you can use it as a shortcut to different things that you can set it to. Now if you are interested in learning a little bit more about how to use the smart key, definitely subscribe to the channel and stay tuned because I will be going over a lot of that in my tips and tricks video for this phone. Now another thing this phone has that's pretty unique is a thermometer. So the thermometer is actually right here next to the camera setup. It's really interesting that this phone has it. I'm not sure how often you might actually end up using it, but it is really cool and kind of interesting that this phone has a feature that's so unique. Now, despite all these unique features that this phone has, the disappointing thing is that it doesn't have NFC. NFC is the technology behind Google Pay and other contactless payment services, and I personally like to use this service a lot. So it is a bit of a disappointment that the phone doesn't have NFC. Lots of phones nowadays are getting it, so it is too bad to see that it's not in this phone yet, but I'm hoping the other Umidigi phones in the future do end up getting NFC. For the software, this phone does run on Android 11. It's not quite the stock Android skin that you would expect, but it is Android 11 all the same. So in conclusion, is the Umidigi A11 worth buying in 2021? Well, I would say it is. This phone has a really nice sized display that's going to be good for content consumption like video streaming and reading and viewing photos, all that kind of stuff. It also has a ton of storage at 128 gigabytes. That's really a lot. There are very few situations where you're going to need more than that. So with this phone, you're really not going to have to worry about running out of space anytime soon. The camera setup is really nice, being able to take high quality photos and having the extra features like an ultra wide camera and a macro camera. The camera setup really does have a little something for everyone. The device security on this phone is also really good, with not only face unlock but also a fingerprint scanner that's right on the power key, pretty much the best spot you can get, really conveniently placed and really fast and responsive as well. And to top it all off, the phone has lots of unique features like the smart key and a thermometer and a really large battery. The only thing I would say about this phone that I don't really like are a few little quirks in the design. The front-facing camera could have been done better. If it were a hole punch design instead of a water drop notch, I think it would have just looked a lot cleaner and nicer. The phone itself is a little chunky too. And then the other area with this phone that you can do a little bit better in this price range is the processing power. The processor isn't too bad in and of itself, but just because you can do better in this price range, I would say that if processing power is one of your top priorities, there are other devices out there in this price range that are more powerful. But overall, in terms of general value, the Umidigi A11 is a real good buy in 2021. But I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I hope you found this information useful as well. If you did, be sure to leave a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel, and I will see you in the next video.